Yeah. Now, Off the Brawl, see what we did there? Is the brand new combat sports show from OTB focusing on boxing and MMA. The podcast for the first episode is available now. We're going to be streaming the show later on tonight across all our channels and over at youtube.com/Off the Ball. Here's Andy Lee talking about his relationship with Gennady Golovkin and the amount of testing he's had before this fight.
And Golovkin's obviously on the last lap of his career now, but you have experience with him in the amateurs. You boxed him a while ago. Did you know there was something special on your hands when you were fighting him, or was it just another Eastern
I had no idea who he was, you know, and I wasn't even aware that Kazakh were a strong nation in boxing, you know, Kazakhstan, and it was second fight in the World Championships, and yeah, I was just, did my best just to hang in there with him, you know. I was getting hit and I didn't even know where the punches were coming from, you know. He was an aggressive counter-puncher as an amateur. He's kind of adapted his style now. He's more of a pressure fighter as a pro. But like you said, what's happened in between? It would only have benefited Canelo. This whatever was 6 months off.
Yeah.
Golovkin's had a fight in between that, so he's had another training camp and he's had another fight. So that's more wear and tear on an already, you know, long amateur and pro career. So I don't know, like the way I see Canelo winning the fight, the way things are going, like Golovkin's definitely been getting tired a lot more later in the fights. You know, when you look at Danny Jacobs, how he came on strong towards the end, and even Canelo in that fight, like when Golovkin needed to push in that fight, it was Canelo who was pushing, you know, down the stretch. But going back to the blood test and the drug test, and it kind of gets brushed swept under the carpet. It's kind of like in boxing anyway. Boxing's not as strict as other sports when it comes to bans and stuff like that, and
which is ridiculous. I know you've talked about it before. Like that, your life is just in jeopardy.
There will be tested now. They've signed up for VADA in this, and I read that Golovkin has been tested 18 times since this fight has been signed. 12 urine tests and 6 blood tests. Yeah. So
all right, so you begin to have a little bit of faith in the testing ahead of this fight. That's Off the Brawl, which will stream live tonight, also featuring Niall. Niall, how are you?
Good, Jerry, yourself?
You made your debut in Off the Brawl because it was the first ever Off the Brawl. How was that?
Yeah, no, it was good, yeah, and looking forward to it. Andy was obviously great on his relationship with Triple G in the big fight this weekend. But yeah, looking forward to it. Lots, obviously, with the big fight coming up in a few weeks in Las Vegas in terms of mixed martial arts.
Yeah, so this is the start of the build-up, really, from the tabloids' perspective. It's like, how do we shoehorn McGregor in? Okay, he's lost the case for 630 quid, 620 euro. That'll do. Get his picture on the face, him drinking a glass of whiskey. No, Notorious. Is this the picture after he lost his...
That's the one from the Maymac fight, in Las Vegas.
So a bottle that night that actually said Notorious on it.
Yeah, we think so. Yeah, he was drinking from it. It looked like I couldn't really see. I was a bit far back, but yeah, you know, Conor. Any sort of time with a bit of camera on him, he'll promote his products.
Right. So, yeah. It was O'Hara's, who are from Carlo, who make loads of very nice beers, and so he's now going to have to pay 620 euro costs to the brewer for having lost the trademark case against him, because he obviously wanted to sell the Notorious whiskey. Bruiser Conor is on to a loser. Bruiser and loser. Yeah, okay, that rounds. He can't use Notorious. Far more importantly, though, the actual press conference to hype up this fight has been announced. There was some debate about whether or not McGregor was going to do any pre-fight promo, and I saw a piece from one of the financial journals recently saying that this is really bad for UFC because they need McGregor to come out. He is like a quick potted history. The UFC sells for billions. Turns out they don't really have that much control over the assets that they thought they had. They'd been building a bunch of new people who keep getting beaten, unfortunately, because they can't fix the fights the way they do in boxing. And suddenly the last great cash cow they have is McGregor, and McGregor's like, well, I'm not sure I want to do all that crappy PR.
I can understand from Conor's point of view why he doesn't want to do it. The fight has obviously only been announced 4 weeks ago, so it's not a quick turnaround for Conor. He hasn't fought in the octagon in 2 years. There's a lot of preparation going into his biggest challenge in mixed martial arts as well, against a guy like Khabib. He has to be in the gym, and Conor, for his mentality as well, when he's in the gym, he's at his best, and that's when he needs to be there. He doesn't need to be anyone to take him away, and I think the fact he's agreed to this one, it's 2 weeks out. He's on his way over to Las Vegas anyway for the last 2 or 3 weeks. He's been supposed to be going. They've put it off, his camp. So once he's out there in America, I'm sure literally the day or two after he'll be straight down. I wouldn't expect too much more from Conor. bar this press conference.
Do you buy the idea that he's managed to break his opponents down psychologically in the build-up to a big fight? Aldo is the obvious example, and can he do the same to Khabib?
Yeah, I think so. I'm really interested to see the dynamic between the two when we see them in New York next week. Conor has traditionally done that. Jose Aldo, you know, martial arts, predicted that to be the case. And I think Khabib's a little bit different than anyone Conor's faced before in terms of, you know, his trash talk and how good he is at it. He's wonderful at it as well. Like, he's had some classic one-liners. So I'm not sure it's going to work to the degree that it has in the past. But Khabib's cockiness, I think, might be the problem for him going into this fight. He's traditionally, you know, I spoke to his coach a couple of weeks ago, Javier Mendez, and the problem with Khabib has been his lack of discipline in actually sticking to a game plan that his coaches have implemented. It's the cockiness and the brashness, the fact he's unbeaten as well. I think that's actually a bit of a disadvantage for him going into this fight because, you know, I often, you know, we saw it with Darren Till last weekend as well, a guy going into a world title fight, a young guy who's unbeaten. I think sometimes you have to, before you go into a world title fight, be beaten to understand that you can't be cocky, especially against a guy like Conor McGregor, who, listen, if Khabib wants to stand with him, I think there's only going to be one outcome, that's Conor McGregor.
But can he not be cocky in his own ability? Like, is there not part of you that goes and says, right, okay, I see your game, and I'm not going to do what happened with Jose Aldo. But actually, I'm unbelievably cocky because I'm here on merit and I've built my career to the point where I can go, well,
yeah, you have to have a little bit of arrogance, but if you're ultimately disrespecting someone and their ability on the feet, and, you know, Khabib has done it. We've seen it against Michael Johnson. You know, Michael Johnson hurt him in the stand-up. And Michael Johnson's nowhere near on the level of Conor McGregor.
So what happened in the Johnson fight then? Explain that.
You know, Johnson clipped Khabib. He went to the ground, looked like he was rocked, looked like he was hurt. He recovered, overcame it.
And so Khabib, when you say disrespect, means he was cocky to the point of, I can just stand here and trade fights.
He was, you know, he took down Michael Johnson, was, you know, working on Michael Johnson on the ground, trying to get a submission on Michael Johnson, but he was ultimately talking to Dana White in the corner, saying, you know, give me a title shot, Dana. He spoke through the whole fight. You can hear him. And Javier Mendez, his coach, and his father were literally shouting at him, Khabib, you know, don't stand, don't trade. And the same in the Al Iaquinta fight in Brooklyn there a number of weeks ago.
Did this not work for Khabib in the end, ultimately?
It does work for him, but it's a massive risk when you stand with Conor McGregor. And if he wants to do that, like Michael Johnson, he stood with Al Iaquinta.
Well, let me. Okay, just,
it's dangerous.
If you're strategizing on his perspective from their camp, you tell McGregor that you're going to be cocky and you're going to stand with him, and you can batter him like that, right? And then McGregor obviously is not dumb enough to think that that's what you're doing, but there has to be an element of bluff in this. It's like, and then the last thing you do is actually what you say you're going to do.
Yeah, I think so, but I think, you know, knowing their coaches and knowing Javier Mendez, that's not the way his fighters fight. He likes his fighter being disciplined, but I'm not sure they really have the belief in Khabib sticking to this game plan, and that's why I'm worried for Khabib. I've got more worried as it's sort of gone on, because I've watched back the Michael Johnson fight, I've watched back the Al Iaquinta fight, and I've heard what's been said in the corners, and his lack of, you know, Khabib, don't do this, Khabib, don't do that. You know, Conor's going to go out there and stick to a game plan. He's not going to slide off a game plan.
Is that a representation of Kavanagh? Like, if you compare Mendez and Kavanagh, is there a big upper hand there for John Kavanagh?
I don't think so, no. I generally don't think so. I think
you're on a similar level of coaching.
Yeah, I think, you know, in terms of probably coaches, Javier Mendez will be, you know, over the years a more world-renowned coach. He's had guys like, you know, Luke Rockhold, Daniel Cormier, you know, UFC two-weight world champions. So, you know, lots of guys there in their stable and lots of experience. But I don't think it's really going to come down to, you know, I think someone's getting finished in this fight. That's how I feel about this fight. I don't think it's going to go the 5 rounds at all. But I just can't wait for this press conference to get, you know, more weight behind it. It's fascinating.
That the UFC are almost really disappointed at the moment, given from what you're talking about Khabib loving to trash talk as well, that they're not getting a press tour out of this, that they don't do a 3-day setup, because this is going to be pretty good.
I think so. You know, I was a little bit disappointed when it was announced for October, because we're not going to have this mass build-up to sell the fight even further. And I think, you know, that extra month or two, maybe Conor would have agreed to do a little, you know, a few more numbers and maybe do a world tour. We've only the one, but listen, I think, you know, we've all the footage from Brooklyn, the horrible incident that was there, but, you know, the UFC are using that ultimately.
Yeah, come on. It's
no surprise.
That was the bit where you're like, come on. Like, you don't need to use it in the ads. You can put those out. You can put spend behind it from,
they're
like.
Always going to use it, Jeff.
But you can do it in a way that's not so naked. Like, come on.
that's Dana White, that's the UFC, that's the way they sell themselves. I know it is WWE-esque at times. It pisses me off, but let's be honest, people are going to look at that, they remember Brooklyn, and that's why a lot of people are tuning in.
I think the way the social media works is you can literally put $1 million behind that and make sure that everybody sees it and it not be associated with your brand. But now they're like, look, lads, the way to get a massive fight is to break into a building, fuck stuff at the side of a bus, break windows, like.
But I think I said that to you in Brooklyn after the fight. I think, after the incident in Brooklyn, I think I said that to you. I said Dana White will probably change his mind 24 hours later, and we'd be looking at this, footage being used to sell a potential fight. And there it is. It's no surprise, I don't think, for people involved in what the UFC do. Let's be honest, Dana White's a pretty greedy and self-indulgent character. So
if I was like the marketing executive for UFC, the ad would have gone something like this. So it would have been a darkened room, and it's
thank God you're not.
and then suddenly a spotlight arrives on Dana White, and he's like, "We've come from a very dark past in UFC. The nadir of the UFC was reached in the Barclays Centre last year, but we're an organisation of forgiveness. We're men of God. We forgive."
It's always darkest just before the dawn. A voice off,
and then a big epic bang, and Conor McGregor appears, says, "I'm sorry," and everybody's like, "That's amazing. They've come through this violent moments that threatened to derail this entire organisation. I really want to buy this fight and see the restitution."
Listen, the fight sales are going to go through the roof on this one. I think the UFC are easily going to break a record. Even with the lack of promotion that we've seen, I know we're seeing the press conference in 2 weeks' time. And listen, the amount of traction that press conference alone is going to get, when they start streaming that on YouTube, you watch the numbers, the internet's going to break for Conor McGregor. It's crazy.
Thankfully it goes online just as off the ball ends that night.
Yeah, 10 o'clock, so tune into it after off the ball.
10 o'clock, which actually means like midnight when McGregor shows up.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, if he shows up, I wouldn't be surprised.
Really?
I know he'll show up. But it is, the interesting thing, it's actually close to the public, and it's in Radio City in New York. And I think, maybe that has something to do with the authorities in New York as well, and maybe some agreements they didn't want to put any fans in jeopardy. So I'm not 100% sure, but imagine, having such a big arena like that rented for just media.
Yeah, it could be something to do with the stipulation from the court case.
Exactly.
All right, what stage are we at in the McGregor career? Like, is it possible he loses this fight and has a rematch, or is it possible he loses this fight and says, I don't really like getting punched in the head anymore, and I have 85 to 100 million quid, and actually my earning potential is not now connected to fights, it's connected to proper endorsements, like another Burger King, somebody else, and a few investments, and away I go. And the reason to get into this was to get rich, not to get beaten up.
Yeah, I think it's, since the Jose Aldo fight, people have been saying, is Conor going to come back? Is Conor going to come back? And he's kept coming back. I know we haven't seen him in the octagon in 2 years. I think we're more likely to see Conor come back if he wins the fight. I think if he loses the fight, not so much of an interest in coming back. But if I think he wins the fight and he wins in impressive fashion against Khabib, which is most likely the case if he is to win, it's going to be a knockout, in my opinion.
Is it not going to be?
There's more interesting fights. Like the UFC have put Tony Ferguson, who was obviously supposed to fight Khabib, back at UFC 223 in Brooklyn. That fight fell out the week beforehand. There's narrative, there's a little bit of distaste there with Conor and Tony as well. He's fighting a guy, Anthony Pettis, a guy who's a former UFC lightweight champion. It's a fantastic, co-main event. And that's set up, I think, in order to create a narrative between the winner of the main event as well. It's there on purpose. It's there for a reason. So it is going to be interesting to see. With the UFC, you're going to have to splash the cash. It's simple. They need guys who are going to sell.
Do we know how much he's going to get for this? Is that like?
I would imagine 50 million plus dollars
for this fight, for the Khabib fight.
Yeah, So you'd be looking at probably in total 50 million. I'd say 30 million plus dollars from the UFC, then a pay-per-view cut as well on top. He'll get a percentage of that. So you'd be looking at up around $50 million, I would imagine.
Well, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Well, then I can.
He's clearly getting more from the last time he got. I think it was the rumor was about $18 million
for
the Eddie Alvarez fight. Then he fought Floyd. 2 years to get him back in. It's going to take a lot of money.
Yeah.
It's not around the ballpark figure that we was in the UFC the last time.
Yeah, okay. I mean, maybe that changes your motivation a little bit. It's like, I can do 2 more of these fights, and that's it.
The thing is, they need draws at the moment. There's not that many guys. Darren obviously losing last weekend, and I think, Dana's relationship with Tyron Woodley as well isn't great. I think it showed a lot he didn't turn up for the post-fight press conference. That was a telling factor for me. Darren, it's obviously, a learning curve for him. He's 25. He's probably going to go to middleweight now. Well, I think he should go to middleweight. But they've no one really, they haven't, it's been their own fault as well to a certain extent. They haven't really put the weight behind certain guys they should have.
Yeah.
And
like you wonder
they always focus on one or two at a time, like Ronda Rousey, Conor McGregor, Brock Lesnar.
Like, I know the UFC have moved beyond this point, but I do wonder, in the early days of McGregor, did Dana White view McGregor as sort of this conduit into the other side of the Atlantic? And I wonder, does he see Darren Till as a similar mechanism where it's like, if we lose Conor McGregor, then Darren Till suddenly becomes our biggest star across the pond? And does he use his pawns like that as a tool for exposure on that side of the Atlantic?
I wouldn't have had Darren fight for the world title last Saturday. It was his first fight on US soil. What they do is they'll have a guy on, a FS1 card, promote him a little bit, then put him on a pay-per-view.
Sure.
So, it was maybe a little bit rushed for me. Colby Covington sitting, waiting there. Didn't want to take the fight at the time. A very interesting character. If you know Colby, he's a gas man. But I would have just given
Republican?
Yeah, he's Donald Trump's friend. But I would have just given Darren a little bit more time to settle and, build him a little more. He's 25 years of age, very young for a fighter. But he's going to go to middleweight, I believe, now. And, this time is on Darren's side, so I expect still a big push from him in the coming months.
Briefly, just to go back to what type of fight you think it's going to be. Again, if you are strategizing and you're in Khabib's corner, what is your strategy?
What is my strategy? Get Conor to the deck and try and maul him. That's literally it. That's what he does. But I think in terms of what Conor, if he does get taken down by him, Conor doesn't want to try and get straight back to his feet. I think you need to attack Khabib, from your back with lots of elbows and things like that. And I think if it's sort of like, if you try to escape from Khabib, he's going to get you further and deeper into where he wants you to be. So 100% that's their tactics. Javier Menez, as I said to you, I was speaking a few weeks ago, he said, we would be absolutely crazy to want to stand with Conor McGregor. And that's obvious. Conor is obviously a superior striker. So for Khabib, it's get him to the ground. For Conor, it's literally stand and bang and try and knock him out. It's going to go one way or the other, and there's going to be a finish.
Is there, like, if it goes to the ground, that's when Khabib suddenly has more than a 50-50 chance?
Khabib, if it goes to the ground and it plays out, if Conor isn't sensible about what he does in the deck, it's going to be a short night.
Right. So either way, you think?
Either way, it's going to be a short night.
And also because neither of them really...
It's fascinating.
Do they both have the gas anymore for 5 full rounds?
I've always sort of, we look at Conor and we've seen his fights. He sort of fades sort of halfway through the fights a little bit. Khabib's kind of the same. I think the weight cut is an issue that hasn't really been brought up as much as, I think it could be a big issue for Khabib. He didn't look great. I don't think, the last time at UFC 223, he missed weight 2013. He did, he was supposed to fight Tony Ferguson a year and a half ago, fell out the night before because he had weight cutting issues. It could be an issue going into this fight, and I think Conor's a lot more comfortable than Khabib at 155 pounds. It's no problem for Conor. That's not far off Conor's walking around weight. But Khabib cuts a lot of weight.
Yeah. All right. No, good stuff. Thanks very much for that.
No problem. Pleasure.
We've got some sense of what's going to happen. I don't know. The press conference, I hope he shows up. I hope that, is it going to sell at 2 million? I don't know if it's going to be this, is it?
Definitely.
Why? What is everybody?
We've seen the bus incident. People have been talking about that with zero promotion for the last month and a half, ever since the fight's been announced.
Talk about the fight before the fight existed.
I was talking to guys in the office the other day. They're going, I can't wait for the fight. I can't wait. When is it? Are we going to see any promotion? The UFC released 3 promotional videos after the fight last Saturday. They obviously can't get a hold of Conor. That's the problem, because people are genuinely interested in seeing how this fight's going to play out, because Khabib's unbeaten as well, 24-0.
And last point on that, is he not doing the promotion because there's a little bit of nagging concern in the back of his mind that it's been so long since he's been in the octagon, and that actually he's been fluting around having the crack, living the life, and that's not the same Spartan lifestyle which brought him to the pinnacle of his sport?
No, I genuinely don't think so. I think when Conor's back in the gym, he's at his best. You look at his Instagram, he's taking bags off walls and things like that. It's very impressive. It looks very impressive, and he looks in good nick ahead of this fight. And I don't think...
Everybody lives their best life on Instagram, though, right?
Yeah, I understand.
Check out Owen's Instagram.
I understand that, but he hasn't been in the papers really for the wrong reasons.
I've got
filters going on there, Owen. Yeah. But there's been no, there's been no issues
But no
really-
WhatsApps.
But yeah, things like that, right? The WhatsApp, really. I'm sick of listening to WhatsApps after the last couple of months. But there's been no issues, in terms of negativity in the papers for Conor. That says to me Conor's back.
Well, he just lost a whiskey brand. He had to pay €630.
Oh,
It's
well,
all over
there
the
you go.
papers this morning.
It's a pocket change.
He could still actually buy the brand from O'Hara's. They're like, well, maybe we could sell it to the guy with all the money. It's
But
like,
people are generally excited about this fight. I have people constantly asking me, about the media and when it's going to happen. We're going to see build up. We're going to hear from Conor. He will show up, probably late, but I'm massively looking forward to a further narrative we're going to get from this press conference because they're both two good trash talkers.
Okay, good stuff, Niall. Thanks for that.